Hello and welcome back to another Giant Slayer TFT patch rundown video. Today we'll be diving into the newest patch 11.8 and all the changes that come with it. This will be the last patch for set 4.5 unless they do any hotfixing between now and the release of set 5. Overall, there's not too many actual balance changes in this patch, as they do put a lot of effort towards making the end of the set fun with some interesting adjustments. Let's go ahead and dive on in to the last patch notes for set 4. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. Up first, we have a system change to cover, which makes Lucky Lantern just a bit more, well, lucky. As this is the last patch for set 4, it makes sense for them to tweak the Lucky Lantern system, as it currently doesn't look like it's making a return in set 5. Maybe down the line a similar system will be added, but for those of you that enjoyed this mechanic, these last 2 weeks should be a lot of fun for you. First off, they're increasing the gold drops from the Lucky Lantern to have more gold. Second is a significant increase in the drop rate for rare items like Nico, Spatula, and even Force of Nature. Gold increases aside, the second change is where the fun is really going to be, as significantly increased implies it's going to happen a lot more often than not. So get ready for a lot of crazy games involving those items. And the last change, which was arguably the craziest, is instead of there only being a 25% chance for a Lucky Lantern to not spawn, there's instead a 25% chance for a Lucky Lantern to drop in all 3 stages. Basically, there's likely to be a Lucky Lantern in every game with a chance of there being multiple. Which on top of the other changes, yeah, that's going to shake up the game quite a bit. Overall, this is a great way to send off set 4.5 and the set as a whole by letting loose and having some crazy fun games. Yes, it does mess with the competitive integrity of the ladder, but you're still going to be able to climb if that's your goal. There's just going to be an increase in the wild games. Next, let's move on to trait changes, which mostly have to do with fortune. Before we talk about those fortune changes, let's first talk about Spirit. Spirit is getting the shaft at the end of set 4.5, as it's getting nerfed somewhat harshly. The attack speed bonus of Spirit is going from 20-35% to 18-30%, which doesn't seem like too drastic, but it wasn't all that necessary. A few metas ago, yeah, this would have been alright, but it's not like Spirit is running rampant through the meta right now. There's a few builds that use it, such as Spirit Sharpshooter or Spirit Assassin, but they're not really overpowered. This nerf also hurts, albeit only slightly, splashing into Spirit. 2% difference doesn't seem like it's that much, but it does make 2 Spirit a bit weaker, which is already relatively niche. All in all, this nerf does seem unnecessary for the last patch of the set, especially considering they're trying to make the patch about having fun rather than worrying about the competitive aspect of balance. Now let's move on to Fortune. Fortune getting tweaks for the final patch of the set makes a lot of sense. The first change is they added a new drop possibility for the 12 loss streak when running 3 Fortune. This has a 40% chance of happening, so don't expect to see it all that often. Exactly what this new mysterious drop is, well, you'll have to play to find out. The other 2 changes of Fortune are downsides, as there's a 4% chance when running 6 Fortune that you'll get a cold-hearted new drop. While this likely alludes to a Frozen Heart dropping, it could also be nothing that drops. It depends on how cold-hearted this change actually is. More than likely, it means Frozen Heart, as the other 6 Fortune changes are an increase to the boot dropping in 6 Fortune. The chance of it happening is going from 1% to 4%. Since the other change also mentions 4%, it's likely to be different from the boot dropping, so that further points to the cold-hearted drop being a Frozen Heart. In any case, the only way to know for sure is for players to go out and play a lot of Fortune. Honestly, they could have gone a bit deeper in on Fortune for this patch, as it certainly has been one of the most volatile traits of the set. Of course, if they go too far making wild game changes, then everyone is going to run Fortune and the game will break down into chaos. Thus, to save a semblance of competitive balance, it does make sense to keep Fortune somewhat status quo to previous patches. With that, we can move on to champion changes. There's no 1 or 2 cost unit changes to go over, so let's begin with Darius. Over the course of set 4.5, Darius has been quite lackluster. Even as a Slayer, he's rarely ever used, as players favored practically every other Slayer over him. In Fortune, he was mostly used as a trait bot or skipped over entirely, as Katarina was an overall better carry. But we've finally seen Darius rise up in usage, particularly with Fortune being so popular in the last few patches. Unfortunately, they're nerfing poor old Darius at the end of the set. The reason is that with the Lucky Lantern changes, the chances of hitting a 3-star unit is going up, so they want to keep Darius in check by preemptively nerfing his damage fall off at tier 3 to go up to 15% from 10%. Not that drastic of a nerf, but it is sad to see Darius get hit by the nerf bat at the end of the set. Nico is in a similar position as they want to make sure she's not too strong with the Lucky Lantern changes. But unlike Darius, they're also toning down her damage at tier 2 as well as tier 3. Nico's ability damage is going down to 325, 425 from 350, 450. Again, these aren't too harsh of nerfs, but Nico isn't exactly that big of a problem, even if a player is able to 3-star her quicker with the Lucky Lantern changes. All in all, the reasoning makes sense for both Nico and Darius, even if nerfing them likely isn't necessary. Aurelion Sol is up next to get hit by the nerf bat, as his damage is going from 325, 500, 1400 to 300, 475, 1300. Aurelion is by far the best 4-cost carry, so it's not all that surprising to see him receive a nerf. Keep in mind that any damage nerf he receives does affect his damage with the mage trait as well, so a 25 damage decrease is more than that when you factor in the double cast from mage. Compared to the 3-cost units being nerfed, this change is good. Aurelion has had plenty of time in the sun throughout set 4.5, and the relatively small nerf shouldn't affect him too much in the last patch of the set. Next is a buff to Kale. Kale's damage is going up to 110, 150 from 100, 140. On one hand, it's an odd buff because Kale is doing well enough in the meta. On the other hand, when you look at how far down in priority Kale and builds using her have fallen, it makes sense to see her receive a buff. All in all, this is a good change to help create more options in the meta so that players can play what they want at the end of the set. Now we have a lot of 5-cost changes that, for the most part, are for fun. This means a lot of numbers are going up for 3-star 5-cost units. Keep in mind that the chances of ever hitting a 3-star 5-cost is really low, though it may be higher with the changes to Lucky Lantern this patch. First up is Azir, who actually needed a bit of a buff. Thankfully, he's receiving it as his damage is going up to 225, 375, 18,888 from 200, 350, 8,888. Okay, it's really not that much of a buff, and as we said, it's best to ignore the 3-star change. Still, Azir's had it rough in set 4, where he did quite well in the first half and not so well in the second. Maybe these buffs will propel him to a status befitting his trait, Emperor. Okay, so this one is almost not worth mentioning, but Lee Sin is losing 1 health from 1,000 to 999. But let's take a moment to address Lee Sin as a champion. Lee Sin was an attempt to make an execute ability feel fair. But ultimately, this was never the case, as having your important unit get kicked off the board never felt fair. Hopefully, between Lee Sin and Urgot from set 3, they've learned how to either properly balance those types of abilities or know to stay away from them entirely in future sets. Ornn finally gets a buff. Ornn has, for the most part, been relegated to the sidelines as a champion that's only been used for his trait. The damage buffs are small, though his ability damage is going up to 175, 275 from 150, 250, but hey, any buffs to him are totally worth it. Artifacts have been great, but it has come at the cost of Ornn being a mediocre champion on his own. Samira takes a bit of a hit to her ability's base damage as it's going from 1525 to 1020. Big hit may be a bit of an overstatement, but considering she's been the best carry in the meta for some time, any nerf is going to be impactful. It's a good change, though it likely needed to come 1 or 2 patches earlier. Sadly, Set has been underwhelming for quite some time. It mostly has to do with his ultimate just not being reliable enough, but also his lack of traits besides Brawler. It makes fitting him into any other build rather difficult. And it looks like not much will change for the boss in this last patch besides having his 3-star damage go up from 400% to 800% and the secondary damage going up to 400% from 200%. These are huge increases, but again, as we've said multiple times now, the chances of hitting a 3-star 5-cost is quite low. Swain is another champion that could have used some balancing a few patches ago since he's been one of the strongest 5-costs alongside of Samira. But it's better late than never, as reducing his maximum health gained after transforming is going to 60-65% from 60-75%. This is a good change, especially considering how prominent Swain has been within the meta for builds like Mage when he has the Mage Hat item. And lastly, there's a buff to Zilean. The revive delay on his ability is going from 3.531 to 3.2.5 seconds. Basically, this means any champion he revives will come back sooner in the fight. It's a nice change for him, though Zilean has been one of the most consistent champions in set 4 without too many drastic champions. Overall, he's definitely the best designed 5-cost of the set. Before we go, there's one item change to talk about, which is to Locket. Locket has been a key item for the early game for quite some time. Recently, as in a few metas ago, it has risen in value for spirit compositions, specifically reroll compositions, since that's where it provided most value. The idea behind using Locket for those builds was to drastically skip having a solid front line, as the shields would protect the backline long enough to win the fight. To reduce that a bit and make Locket go back to its earlier game roots, They're lowering the shields it provides at tier 3 to 400 from 450. It's still going to be effective early game, but any build rerolling with Locket will be slightly weaker. Overall, this change won't make too much of an impact because the builds rerolling with Locket were already falling off. This, mixed with the Spirit nerf, likely means we won't be seeing many one-cost reroll builds in the last meta for Set 4. And that's all for today's video, folks. All in all, there's a good mix of normal balance changes and wild changes to help make this a great last patch for Set 4.5. Due to the volatility that a lot of these changes will cause, particularly Lucky Lantern, it's worth pointing out that ranked is likely going to be a bit of a mess. So don't worry too much about climbing and instead just have fun. Let us know in the comment section below if you think they did a good job with this patch or if you think they should have gone even wilder with the changes. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.